So this is our house, and we just bought it over a year and a half after moving to Norway. And I know that some of you dream of moving to Norway, and I thought that sharing my experience of how we managed to buy our first house within the first 2 years after moving might be of help, and at least give you hope and motivation to start your own journey. So this is what this video is about. So as a disclaimer, I am not an expert of these procedures. This is just me sharing our experience, how it happened for us with our situation and our own specificities. And we made a lot of mistakes along the way. We learned a lot. This is definitely not the ultimate how to buy a house in Norway. It also means that I won't be able to answer questions that you have about your own situation and your specificities. And I think that the Norwegian authorities might be much more competent in this regard than me. So, yeah. So that being said, I think it's important for me to share what is actually our situation. So basically, we come from Switzerland. We have the Swiss nationality. And I legally moved in Norway in May 2023. And since then, I have a sole proprietorship registered here in Norway, so I'm self-employed. Johan is still a Swiss resident and he doesn't meet the requirements to move here because he still splits his time pretty much between here and Switzerland. And so legally, he still resides in Switzerland, and that's important. But we definitely share our living costs. And then I think it's worth saying that we're talking about buying a house in the far north of Norway and not in the south, where population density is a bit higher. This implies, from what I've seen, that things can be a little bit slower and a little bit more difficult sometimes. And also know that it's our very first house purchase, so we don't have anything else to compare it to, neither here or anywhere else in the world. So yeah, I think that sums up everything you need to know about our situation for now. And so I won't give you all the details of how we moved here. That's not the purpose of that video, but if you're interested in that, then maybe drop a comment below so that I know that this is a story that might interest you. But basically, we moved here so in May 2023. And prior to that, we had made a trip in January to visit some houses around Trondheim area and here in the north. And and so we had the idea at some point to buy in the far future, but we also knew that at that point it was just impossible for us. So we only looked for rental at the time. And we ended up visiting this house. That is the one we bought, but rented first. And so as we had this idea of buying and that we already really liked the house, even before visiting it, we actually already asked the landlord, like the previous landlord, if at some point he wished to sell, not knowing when, but just knowing if it would be an opportunity or not. And it would also help us knowing how much we should kind of settle in the house or not, and knowing if there was just an opportunity in the future that, you know, that we could foresee buying it and staying there longer than just a few years and then moving for something that we would buy. And so even at the time, like, he had moved to Oslo in the south, he wasn't planning at all to come back here in the north. And so he directly told us that at some point he would sell the house. So that was already a very good point for us. There you go. And so May 2023, we moved. And so I'll jump in time a little bit, but in April 2024, our landlord announced that he wanted to sell the house. It's funny because a few months prior to that, with Yuan, we started talking about the possibility of buying the house progressively. So basically, our idea was to take advantage of the fact that we were renting the house. And so we thought that we could, like, we didn't go into details, but we had this idea that maybe we could progressively take over the loan, like transfer the loan to my name, or eventually, like, yeah, I don't know, like finding a way to just buy the house, but like instead of monthly paying our rent, we would actually monthly be buying the house to the landlord, and we would like be investing in the house and not just renting and basically giving him money. That was our idea for the last month prior to April 2024. And we never had the chance to talk about this to the landlord because he announced that he wanted to sell before that. So knowing that we wouldn't be able to purchase the house progressively, we definitely agreed that we needed to compare this house with whatever else was on the market, just to like have a sense of whether this was in good condition for its price, whether it was a nice region or not, whether, well, we knew that already, but but like, was there anywhere else that we would like feel so good also? And yeah, like we needed to compare. But while I started searching for other houses, I directly contacted few banks in order to see what were the financing options and also what was required to get a loan here, because I had no idea. So I contacted 4 different banks, apart from the one I have my accounts with, and they all rejected my file basically from the start. And the reason for that was that I was just over my first year living in Norway. So 2023 had been my very first year like registered in Norway, and I spent like, well, since middle of May, so that was approximately 7 months. And I didn't have my tax return yet. And so what you have to know is that Norway is a country of transparency, but that also means that several systems and services are connected. So any bank, in order to assess whether they're going to grant you a loan or not, demands to have access to your taxes. And you surely can refuse, I think, but then you will be sure that they won't grant you anything because they don't accept any other proof of revenue than your tax declaration, because it sums up kind of all your incomes, what you're paying to the state, what are some of your living costs, etc. So that's really their basis in order to assess your reliability. And so at that point, I just had completed my tax declaration, but the state hadn't returned it to me validated. So the banks didn't have any history, like tax history, to look at and in order to assess what I was earning. And I tried like negotiating by saying like, I have my Swiss tax declaration for the other years. I can show you like the invoices that I bill. I can show you bank extracts where I receive money every month for the work that I do, etc. But there was like basically no discussion. And so basically with all of these banks, when they heard that 2023 was my first year in Norway, that it wasn't even complete, that I didn't have any tax return to show, they just said no. Simply, they wouldn't discuss further. They'd even like, they wouldn't take any of my other proof of income, and it was just, okay, yeah, like, don't waste your time. It's no, we're not gonna waste ours. So yeah, so basically I had few phone calls and that was it. And the other thing that we ask also, because I don't have a huge revenue, so every time I tried asking if Johan could be on the loan too, even if he's not registered in Norway, and that was a complete no-go too. So that's maybe the first thing that you have to like really pay attention to, is that if you want to get a loan with a Norwegian bank, you have to have an identity number here. I think that even if you have a D number, which is kind of a like temporary ID number, it could work. But if you don't have anything, then it's going to be impossible. And so, of course, the aim was for Johan to be part of the loan too, so that we could count both of our incomes, and it would be like much easier and more certain that the loan will be granted. But that was not an option either. So at that point, honestly, I wasn't super optimistic, because given what I earn and the fact that I didn't even have one tax return yet, etc., it seemed very complicated. And so, of course, what I did too was to contact the bank I have my money with, since I'm here. And honestly, that's the only bank that has agreed to further discuss my case, and I'm so grateful they did. And so it's not sponsored in any way, but just to give you the information, the bank that has agreed to give me the loan is Sparebank N. I think that they're used to deal with like immigrants and people who haven't been living here for a long time. And so my advisor completely agreed to look at my file even if I didn't have the tax return. And so what we did was to do a lot of simulation. I sent him already like bank extracts and proofs of what I was earning apart from like not coming from the tax return, so that he could already assess like if there was a chance for me or not to get the loan. And so at that moment, I started becoming optimistic again because everything, like, he wouldn't agree to get Yuan on the loan. That was still no go for them. That was impossible to do. But with what I was earning, there was a good chance, like, he was pretty sure that I would be able to get the loan. The only thing is that as for the other banks, he would need the tax return, like even his computer system wouldn't agree to move forward the procedures if he couldn't access a tax return. But that was more of a formality for him than actually an obstacle. So it was just a matter of waiting for it to come. And then we could like officialize kind of the procedure and move forward for real. And he still asked me for some other proof for the beginning of 2024, just to make sure that I was still earning money. And he asked for my consulting agreements that I had, etc. But well, all of that to say, we managed to find a way. We still needed that dang tax return to be able to officialize the procedures, but there were some room for negotiation and other ways of proving also my incomes. And so that's the only bank who agreed to talk with me. So if there are some things to take away from this part, is that if you want to hope to get a loan here in Norway, at least here in the north, you need an identity number, whether it's a real identity number or a D number, but here in Norway, you do need to have at least one tax return validated by the state, and most of the banks will actually ask for more than one. And so, as I said, besides that, we spent the whole summer visiting houses in order to compare what this one was worth with what was on the markets. I'm not gonna detail that because I made 2 videos last summer about this, so you can like feel free to go and check them. But what I wanted to share about that was that the place we found all our listings on were on a website that is called fin.no. So basically it's a huge website where both private and professionals put anything and everything for sale. You can find clothes, you can find like cooking stuff, you can find like, that's where we bought also our secondhand car this summer. So you can find basically anything, and most of the real estate agencies do put their like house for sale on this website, and so private people do also. So honestly, we didn't look other than on this website. The other option that you have is also to check directly on the real estate agency's websites, because they do have like all their listing up there. And I guess like anywhere else in the world, you can also go to the agency, but we never done that. Like we only relied on Finn basically. And something that might also work, I know that here the community, at least here in the north, the community uses a lot Facebook, whether it's to manage events, whether it's to put things for sale, etc. So we didn't use Facebook, but there might be a good chance that some of the listings are present on Facebook, especially I think when the seller doesn't like go through a real estate agency. So there might be a chance, at least for the far north, that some things can be found also on Facebook. And so if you're considering buying a house in Norway, but I think it's worth for anywhere in the world, I would really advise that you do visit a lot of houses, that you compare, and that you see different price ranges also, just to see like what it gives you access to or not. It allows you to see what you can get as a house in terms of sizes, in terms of condition, in terms of location also for a given price range. And just feel what could, be a good fit for you and your needs. Oh, and one thing that is super cool here is that every time that the house is put for sale, they, like the owners, do what is called here a tilstandsrapport, something like that. I'm still not good with the pronunciation. Anyway, what it is basically, it's that an expert comes to the house and makes a whole assessment of the condition of the whole house. So that's talking about the roof, about the foundations, about are the floors flat inside of the house, how are the equipment, is everything up to date to the norms, etc. They really check everything. And they put up a report of this assessment, and you do have access to that report before even visiting the house. So you most often have access to it with the listing. And I thought that was really, really good, especially here as we have to often drive a lot of kilometers to go and visit houses. It really allows you to sort out the houses that you really want to visit and that are going to be worth it versus the ones that you can already see that some of the stuff inside of the house or part of the condition of the house is not going to match your needs. So yeah, that was really helpful because at some point we considered taking a house that was in less good condition than this one, including one that had mold problem in the foundations. And after discussing, we decided that this was not a good idea to go with for our first house. So then every time we saw on the report that the house had like humidity problems in the foundation, etc., then we knew that it wasn't even worth visiting it because we wouldn't want to go with that. So yeah, given the criteria you might have, I think that reading this report beforehand is really a good idea because it really helps you to already get a sense of what the house is like, what is its condition, and then when you visit, you're also aware of all of that. And yeah, I guess some things are less of a surprise when you arrive, and that's already pretty good. And it can spare you some time visiting houses that are just not a match for you. And so in our case, the conclusion of our comparison was that the house we were renting, so this house was the best match for us, I guess, in terms of price, in terms of condition, and in terms of location, because you know how much we love these mountains and the waterfall and everything that is around. And so once you have chosen the house that you'd like to buy, then the next step is to go back to the bank saying like, I have decided this is the house I want to buy. Can you please check if I can actually get a loan for that one? Because they do then need to put into their system exactly like the address, all the specificities of the house, and of course the price. That's what I did with my bank. I asked him, I told him like, okay, so we've settled, this is the one we'd like to buy. Could you do one more simulation in order to check if this could really be okay with my income? and it still was okay. So that was pretty good. But I was still missing my tax return. And that was, I think we were at the end of the summer, so it probably was between August and September. And so usually what happens next is that if the bank gives you the green light, then what you do is that you make an offer on the house. So most of the houses we visited were handled by real estate agencies, and so this means that they were the ones handling the bids. And honestly, we were so impressed by how fast some of the houses would sell. Few of the houses we visited had the bids open basically for 24 hours after the group visit date. The owners would receive like 3 or 4 bids, which we would be informed of by SMS, because like when you go and register for a visit, they kind of put you on the loop to be informed of how are the bids going and what are the offers on the house if you want to place one for yourself. And so sometimes like the house would get 3 or 4 bids, and within 24 hours the owner would accept one of the bids and the house would be sold. So that to me was super fast, like considering that you're actually buying a whole house. But I also think that it's just completely different here compared to Switzerland, where in Switzerland it's super difficult to buy something. You need a lot of upfront money. And yeah, it's just not the same culture, I think, between renting and buying. And here, buying is definitely made easier. And a lot of people, especially here in the north, are owner of the house. There are very few rentals, so that changes a lot. But still, like 24 hours to decide whether you're going to buy a house or not, I think it's pretty fast. So yeah. And so our house was also handled by a real estate agency, but we also had a very good contact and good relation with our landlord, as we were renting the house for a year before, like over a year before buying it. So that made things and communication much easier also. But given that I was still waiting for my tax return to make sure that I would be able to get a loan, so what I did was that I placed what is called a conditional bid. So basically, I filled in everything normally, but I added a condition to the bid stating that I would buy the house if and only if everything was to go through with the bank and with the financing. So that would protect me that if anything happened and that once I got my tax return, the bank would refuse my loan, etc., then I wouldn't be bounded to buy the house anyway. So this is what we did. And of course, like the owner at the time accepted it because it was much easier for him to sell the house to me, who had been living in the house, who was already there, etc., than having to find another buyer. So that's how we kind of went around the fact that I still didn't have all the papers required at the time. So yeah, I think it's good for you to know that this is an option to place a conditional bid in case you don't have everything required yet. But I'm not sure how realistic it is to place such bid with the hope of getting the house if you don't know the landlord or the owner at that moment. And so I'll skip the details, but I finally got my tax return in November, which is basically the last delay you could ever get your tax return. Like it's the 1st of December, so I got it, I think it was mid-November, something like that. So once I got it, I could send it to my bank, who could finally validate my loan. And so basically, both the bank and the real estate agent had to get their paperwork done for me to sign. While a lot of things can be found in English within the Norwegian administration, be ready to translate a lot of things from Norwegian to either English or your language. While some of the process with the bank was available in English, as well as with the real estate agency, I think, most of the documents were in Norwegian and they just didn't have an English version. So we did spend a lot of hours translating the documents. We also asked a lot of precisions because obviously the translation that you can get are of good quality but not perfect, and there are, you know, words that are specific to these types of topics that are not really well translated. So yeah, it was also a lot of back and forth with the bank, with the agency, so that we were like, especially as it's our first house purchase, like I really wanted to make sure that I was understanding everything that I was signing and that I was getting myself into. So yeah, that took quite a lot of time and of energy also, but yeah, it needed to be done anyway. So the first thing that I signed was the loan with the bank, which was a mortgage. Here they call it a boliglån.
What you doing, bro?
I'm signing for the home mortgage for the bank.
The home?
Yes, this home.
This home?
Okay.
What does it say?
It says that I have signed everything for the loan.
For the loan.
Yes.
So, we built a house.
So I think we bought a house, yes.
Wow. That's good.
Yes. Now I can collapse. I had a 5.49% interest rate, which is probably one of the highest in the world, I guess. And with a 17.5% of upfront payment, because here you can, like, banks can lend you the money up to 85% of the price of the house, and then you have to put 15% as upfront payment. And in addition to that, the state actually takes 2.5% of the price of the house on any house transactions that is happening. So in the end, you have to pay this 2.5% to the state when you get the house as a buyer, and the 15% for the loan, obviously. So basically, for this house that we bought, 1,650,000 crowns, we paid an upfront payment of approximately 288,000 crowns. So that's 17.5% basically, which includes the tax for the state and the actual upfront payment to the bank. How it happened, it was pretty simple because it was the bank with which I have all my accounts. So basically, once I gathered all the money for the upfront payment, the bank just debited the part of my upfront payment, and they sent all the money, so my payment plus the money that I was lending, directly to the real estate agency. And then it's the real estate agency that takes care of paying the seller of the house. Then on the other hand, with the real estate agency, papers took a little bit longer than expected to be completed, because the previous owner of this house actually had a lot of debts put on the house. So basically the house was the guarantee for all the debt that he had. It's the job of the agent to contact each of these creditors to get a written confirmation that they agree to remove their debt from the land registry, so that it's completely clean for once I take over. Because obviously I don't want to inherit the debts of the other owner. And that took a lot of time, because he really have actually to call every single one of them to get their approval. And meanwhile, I still was able to sign the sales contract, because in the condition it was written that the land registry would be cleaned, like completely cleared from all the debt once I take over. So there was a guarantee of that in the sales contract. And if they couldn't clear completely the land registry, then the sale would be just cancelled. That I signed in between, and then it was just a matter of waiting for the land registry to be completely cleared before I could take over. And so the last thing that was left to do, once the agent did his job and completely cleared the land registry was for us to take over the house. So most often this is a procedure that happens with both the seller and the buyer on the property together, and they just go around the house, check if nothing has changed since the buyer has visited the house, if everything is as agreed on, etc., etc., and they fill in a form that they sign together. They hand the key to the buyer, over to the buyer. And yeah, this is usually as it happens. But as for me, there were two things. The fact that I had been living here for over a year and a half made all those questions about whether it's what we'd agreed on, etc., just not applicable at all. And the other thing is that the owner, like the seller of the house, lived in Oslo, which is 1,000 kilometers down south. It was complicated for him to be here, and again, there was not really a point in doing that. So basically what we did is that we filled in that same form but online together over the phone. And once we had completed it, we just both signed electronically, and that was it. And so Saturday, 14th of December 2024, I officially became owner of this house while driving back to go to Switzerland for the holidays. That was pretty funny. Yeah. So just for the story, like, because of all of these debts and land registry thing, like the agent couldn't sort things out before we had planned to go to Switzerland for the holidays, and he couldn't figure things out before we left. So I ended up filling that form and signing for the takeover while driving back to Switzerland. So I actually wasn't in the house when that happened, and I wasn't in the house for the following month. So yeah, that's just for the story. That was funny. But yeah, so this is it. For those of you who have been following my journey for a while now, you followed all the steps of that story, but you didn't have like the final confirmation. So since the end of last year, this is official. This is now my house, our house, and it feels good. It feels really good. Yeah, I think I'm super grateful that I've been able to do that now. It's really nice. So yeah, I think that this summarizes well the whole process we've been through, even though it doesn't really translate all the stress and hurdles, the hours spent over the phone, all the emails written, the tens of pages that we translated, and yeah, but it is done. It's been an adventure, let me tell you. But it's still pretty unbelievable that this happened, and I feel just so grateful that I get to call this home my home now. Like, really my house. And yeah, that's pretty wild. Well, anyway, I hope that this might help you on your own journey. I want to thank you once again for being part of mine, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Maybe one day